Hello guys, this is Tata, Faculty for Taxation. In this video, I shall be covering provisions pertaining to income from house property. This video is basically for those students who are attempting their exam in this coming January. Probably the exams are starting from 21st. So this video is for all those students who are writing them. Now going forward, income from house property, to fall under the ambit of the provisions of income from house property, you have to satisfy two basic conditions. First, there should be a house property, and the second thing is the assessee should be the owner of that particular house property. And once you satisfy that particular condition, it depends as to how the assessee is using that particular house property, whether he is self-occupying it or whether he is letting it out on rent and he is receiving some income. So going forward, you have two types of properties, that is, they are classified into two types of properties. The first thing is let out house property and the second one is self-occupied property. When it comes to let out house property, everything that you receive as an income from let out property is taxable. Alright, now coming forward to self-occupied property. Now if you have up to a max of 2 self-occupied properties, you can claim exemption for both the self-occupied properties. As such, what a self-occupied property means? It means you have not let it out on rent. When you don't let out on rent, by default there is no income from that particular property. Now, however, if you have more than 2 self-occupied properties, up to a max of 2 self-occupied properties are exempt. Now say you have 5 houses, okay, house number 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now out of these 5 houses, only 2 house properties will be considered as self-occupied and shall be given an exemption for. For the remaining 3 house properties, you will be taxed. How? Because they are treated as deemed let out. So you have to keep in mind that up to a max of only 2 self-house properties are exempted, and any other house property beyond 2 house properties, even if they are not let out, they will be treated as deemed let out. Now you must be wondering, how will you tax a property? How will you calculate income, or you can rather say, how can you calculate rental income of a property which is not let out? That is, I have not given my property on rent. There is no tenant. Now how will I get rent? That is what you must be wondering. So there is a process, there is a procedure as to how the income will be calculated, even for a property which is not actually let out. So just to brush up again, if you have more than 2 house properties, that is, you have a total of 5 house properties. If you have only 2 house properties, well and good, you can claim an exemption for both the house properties. Now the question is, when you have more than 2 properties, okay, here if you have more than 2 properties, out of the total of 5 properties, you can claim an exemption for 2 house properties only. The remaining 3 will be treated as deemed let out and they will be taxable. Now, keeping aside the fully let out property which will be fully taxed, keeping aside the self-occupied property, there is another situation where you may have a house. Okay, you might have a property which you are using it for your own business. In that particular scenario, what happens? You will not consider anything. You will just ignore it, because that will be used for your business and profession, and that is also not taxable again. It will not be treated as deemed let out. Now that is one aspect. Now going forward, there is an amendment through Finance Act 2019. Now what this particular amendment is telling you is, Now assume you are in a real estate industry. Okay, you have a house which is being constructed. Okay, you have a house which is being constructed, and after completion, you'll receive something called as completion certificate. What is this completion certificate? The moment you receive a completion certificate, it means basically a completion certificate is a legal document. It will tell you that you have constructed all. Once you receive it, it will tell you you have constructed as per the approved plan. Alright, and you have not deviated. So that is called as completion certificate. The moment you receive your completion certificate and still it is vacant. Okay, as per the above scenario, any property over and above 2 etc., it will be deemed let out. But in the case of a house property which is treated as stock in trade, that is, if you are into a business of real estate, okay, and as a result of that you have a business of even letting out of properties, you got a house property constructed. Okay, when you construct a particular house, you received your completion certificate, and after receiving that completion certificate, if it is vacant for a period of 2 years, okay, that is, if it is vacant for a period of 2 years after receiving the completion certificate, then you can claim the taxable value as nil. Okay, and it is not treated as deemed let out. That is what your amendment is telling you. Now, the next thing is we will learn how to compute house property, like how to compute computation of income from house property. Before that, we'll look into few important terms which are used while computation. Okay, they are fair rent, municipal rent and standard rent. What exactly is fair rent? For instance, I own a particular apartment in a particular area. Okay, and I really don't know what is the rent of that. Say it is 1000 SFT. Now, what is fair rent is a similar apartment in a similar area with similar amenities. Whatever it is fetching, that is called as fair rent. For example, this example says, for example, I have a flat in Kandivali in Mumbai. Okay, with 2 bedroom having a carpet area of 900 SFT. Now, keeping aside what the rent of that flat is, or what I am charging, or assume it is self-occupied, to understand the fair rent of that particular property, you have to check the rent of a similar apartment in the same area with similar amenities. Okay, whatever the other apartment is fetching, that rent is treated as fair rent. Okay, a similar apartment in the similar area, in the same area, whatever it is fetching, that is called as fair rent. Now, next one is municipal rent. What is municipal rent? Your municipal department, your municipal authority will fix a particular value to your property. Okay, on the basis of which they even calculate their the property tax which has to be levied on you. So that is called your municipal rent. Okay, which will be fixed. And what is standard rent? There is something called as Rent Control Act. Beyond what is mentioned in the Rent Control Act, okay, you cannot charge beyond that. Why is this act into place? It is only to regulate the rent. Okay, you cannot charge exorbitantly. You cannot charge very high as in how you want. So, keeping that in mind, they have brought up few provisions under Rent Control Act. So, the rent that is fixed by the Rent Control Act is called as standard rent. Okay, it is, you can rather say it is more fixed by few legal parameters. And then what is the actual rent? Now, actual rent, for example, you have an apartment. You say the rent per year, per month is say 25,000. So how much will it work out to per year? Per year it will work out to say your 25,000, right? 25,000 into 12. It will work out to how much? 3 lakhs? Fine. It will work out to 3 lakhs. Now out of this 3 lakhs, you have received, that is your tenant has paid you how much? 2,50,000 he has already paid you. But for a period of 2 months, he said for 2 months he told you he'll pay you later. This is rent receivable, not received, rent receivable. So your actual rent has to be considered as the rent that you have already received and the rent which is yet to be received, okay, which is receivable, that is unrealized rent. Now how do you calculate the annual value is the next point. Now you have your municipal rental value which is fixed by your municipal authorities and your fair rental value. Now you will consider both these things. Okay, out of the two, whichever is higher, that will be treated as you consider that first. Okay, take into consideration the municipal rental value and the fair rental value. Whichever is high, that it cannot cross the standard rent, right? Standard rent is the limit which has already been fixed. So you should restrict yourself to standard rent. So assume in our case, municipal rental value is higher than fair rental value. So let it be municipal rental value. Now consider municipal value. Okay. Now next you will compare municipal rental value and standard rent. Okay. You will consider these two things. Out of these two things, whichever is lower, okay, whichever is lower can be your expected rent. Now I will repeat. First you have to consider municipal rental value and the fair rental value. Out of the two, whichever is higher, that you will compare with the standard rent. In our case, assume that the municipal rental value is higher. So select municipal rental value and that you compare it with the standard rent. Okay, and whichever is lower, that will be your expected rental value or expected rent. Now expected rent, you compare it with actual rent. Now what is actual rent? The amount which is received and which is receivable. Okay, out of these two, whichever is higher, now that will be your gross annual value. Now look into the tabular format. The same thing applies to deemed let out property also. Okay, so consider the municipal rental value and the fair rental value. Whatever is higher, okay, compare it with the standard rent. When you compare it with the standard rent, whichever is lower, that will be your expected rent. Okay, and expected rent, compare it with actual rent. Now out of these two, whichever is higher, okay, that will be your gross annual value. Now after arriving at gross annual value, you will certainly be paying your municipal taxes. Okay, this is the only major thing that is specifically allowed as a deduction. Okay, apart from 30% that we'll look at in the next step. Now whatever municipal taxes you are paying to the local authority, say your municipal your municipal department, or you say your local panchayat or anything, your municipal taxes, that shall be reduced from the gross annual value. Now after reducing the municipal taxes from your gross annual value, the amount what you arrive at is your net annual value. Now this is the value what you arrive at. After arriving at the net annual value, you will be given a standard deduction at the rate of 30%. Now why are they giving you a deduction of 30%? Because to maintain any house, every year you will be incurring some basic expenditure for its maintenance. So considering all the basic expenses, the department has been liberal enough to give you a deduction of 30% in addition to the municipal taxes. Alright, so 30% of NAV you will be calculating, 30% you will be further reducing. Alright, now keeping that aside, interest on loan after standard deduction, you will be having something called as interest on loan. Now, one more important point which you have to note here is, in case of self-occupied property, you will not have municipal taxes. Like even if you pay it, you will not be permitted with a deduction. I mean, you have nothing to deduct from, so the entire thing will be left empty. Alright, except for the interest on loan, whatever you are bearing, subject to a max of 2 lakhs, which you will look into subsequently. Now, the interest component, we shall look at it into detail. Now, what is your interest component and what will you exactly, what is the amount up to which you will deduct? Assume your house property is let out, that is, it is fetching you income, it is fetching you rent. In that particular case, whatever you are generating, whatever you are paying, interest, whatever you are paying to your bank or from wherever you have taken a loan, the entire amount of the interest that is being paid will be permitted as deduction if it is a let out house property or it is a deemed let out property. Now, the technical aspect comes up when it is self-occupied property up to a max of 2 houses. Okay, in the first case, if the loan is taken prior to 1/4/1999, okay, prior to 1/4/1999, that is the second case, the maximum interest that is permitted will be 30,000 per year, per annum. Okay, now in the second scenario, okay, please note this is for self-occupied property, for up to 2 houses. Okay, over and above 2 houses, they will be treated as deemed let out. So there is no limit on the interest that you are paying for a deemed let out house property up to 2 houses. Okay, in the next case, in the special case, what he said is, if the loan is taken after 1/4/1999, what will you do? Loan taken for purchase or construction of a house property. In that particular case, if loan for construction, the construction should be completed within 5 years. Okay, so you take a loan today, within a period of 5 years, the construction should be completed. In that particular case, the maximum deduction that is permitted is 2 lakhs. Okay, this can be permitted as your deduction if it is self-occupied property up to a max of 2. And there is another point. For instance, you take a loan. Okay, you take a loan. You are paying interest, everything. However, to repay this particular loan, you take another loan. You take a new loan. Now, the moment you take a new loan, you will be repaying the old loan. This will be struck off. Now, interest paid on the second loan also shall be permitted as deduction. Alright. Now, one important point, you can take a loan either from a bank or any other source. However, if you take any loan from outside India, it shall not be allowed as deduction if TDS is not deducted as required to be done. Whatever is the percentage of TDS, tax deduction at source, it has to be complied with, or else you will not be permitted with a deduction. That is, you cannot claim interest as deduction to whatever you pay outside India. The next thing comes up is pre-construction or pre-acquisition interest. This is one of the most important points you have to note in income from house property. What it says is, what is pre-construction interest? Now you take a loan. Okay, now you take a loan for construction of a particular house. Now, for construction of this particular house, will it happen immediately? Now say today is 1st Jan, assume it is 1st Jan. Now if you take a loan today, say it will at least take 3 years. It will at least take 3 years to complete your construction. So say 1st Jan 2016 you have taken a loan, and you are going to construct and you are going to complete your construction by 31st of December 2017. Now what happens here? Assume you receive your completion certificate on 31st December 2017. So the interest whatever you are paying until the property is completed, that is called as pre-construction interest. Alright, I will repeat again. So consider you are taking a loan on 1st Jan, okay, say 2016. Now your house is under construction till 2019 December, 31st December 2019. Okay, so you have taken, when have you taken the loan? You have taken a loan on this particular date at the rate of say 10%, at the rate of 10%. Now on 31st December you are receiving a completion certificate, that's stating that your property is complete, you can occupy your property, okay, or you can let it out. Now you will be paying interest even prior to the completion, right? Before you let it out on rent or before you self-occupy it. So what happens here, the amount of interest that you pay prior to the completion of that particular property, that is, for instance, you completed it on 31st December, okay, you completed on 31st December, say 2016-17, you can consider this 2016-17 is the financial year in which you have taken your loan. Alright, I am being slow. 2016-17 is the financial year in which you have taken loan, and time passes, 2017-18 is the next year, then 2018-19 is the second, third year, and then 2019-20 is the year in which you have completed your construction. So you have completed on 31st December 2019. 31st December 2019. So the interest paid from 2016-17 to 2018-19, this will be treated as pre-construction interest. Pre-construction interest. You may either construct a particular property or you may buy a property which is under construction. So either ways the same is applicable. So the amount whatever is paid prior to the year in which the property is completed. Please note, prior to the year in which the property is completed. Though it is completed somewhere in between 31st, that is somewhere in between 1920, you should ignore the entire year. The period prior to the year in which it was completed, that will be treated as pre-construction interest. Okay, now pre-construction interest, how will you deal with it? Say you have a pre-construction interest of 1 lakh. Okay, 1 lakh rupees you have been paying. Now this 1 lakh, it will be split into 5 equal parts and it will be spread over this succeeding the next 5 years. You can claim a deduction in the next 5 years. That is how it is telling you. Now we have an example also here that will help you clear, give you a better clarity. Now in this example is telling you Shravani has taken a loan from SBI Housing Limited for how much? 12 lakhs on 1st of December 2016. So when was this loan? It was taken in the financial year 2016-17, where it starts. Now she made a principal payment. He is telling you And when was the construction completed? This is also important for you. And the rate of interest, he's asking you to calculate interest for the previous year 2019-20. Now going forward, she has taken a loan of 12 lakhs at the rate of 12%. When did she take it? Just make a note. On 1st of December 2016. That is, this entire year, basically a year has 12 months. So proportionately calculate. This is for 4 months. You have to calculate interest for 4 months for this financial year 2016-17. Only 4 months interest she has paid. So 12%, that is on 12 lakhs, how much is 12% for 4 months? So on 12 lakhs you have to calculate 12% for 4 months. Why? Because she has taken a loan in the previous year 2016-17, and when did she take it on April 1st? No, she has taken it on 1st of December. So when she has taken it on December to March 2017, how many months? It will be 4 months. So 12 lakhs into 12% into 4 by 12, that comes to 48,000. Now in the next year, that is 2017-18, the beginning, that is on the first day, she has repaid an amount of 3 lakhs. That is the principal amount she has repaid it. That is what is given in the question also. You can see. On 1st of April 2017, she has repaid an amount of 3 lakhs. So the principal amount of 12 lakhs will be gradually reduced to how much? It will be reduced to 9 lakhs. Now going forward, on 9 lakhs for 12 months you will calculate at the rate of 12%. That will come to 1,08,000. Alright. Now that is the pre-construction interest in the year 2017-18. Now when was the next amount? When did she pay the next amount? She repaid a further principal of 2,50,000. 2,50,000 she has, not 2 lakh, she has repaid 4 lakhs also. She has repaid 4 lakhs on 1st of 10th 2018. On 1/10/2018 she has repaid how much? 4 lakhs. Now when you look at this, 1/10/2018, alright, that is falling in 2018-19. In the previous year, that is in the financial year 2018-19, she has repaid an amount of 4 lakhs. So that too, when did she pay? She paid it in October. So from April to September, that is March, April, May, June, July, August, September. How many months? It is one second, September. No, you should not include March, sorry. It is 6 months. So on a total of 9 lakhs, you are supposed to calculate 12% for how many months? For 6 months. The same thing is done here. And after September, on October, she has repaid 4 lakhs. So out of 9 lakhs, if you reduce 4 lakhs, it will come down to 5 lakhs. Alright. Now on 5 lakhs, you are further calculating 12% for 6 months. Okay. So that will further come down to how much? That will further come down to 30,000. So for 6 months you are paying an interest of 54,000, and for the remaining 6 months you are paying an interest of 30,000 for this entire financial year. That is coming down to 84,000. Now when you accumulate, when you add all these 3 financial years, previous years, it comes to 2,40,000, which will further be split into 5 equal installments. When you are spreading it out over 5 equal installments, it will come to 48,000. So this one in the next 5 years, you will be able to claim a deduction of 48,000. That is a part 1/5 of the pre-incorporation interest. You can claim it for the next 5 subsequent years. Now, what you have to note here is important point. In the year 2019-20, when was your construction actually completed? It was completed on Feb 14th, 2020. Okay, it was completed on Feb 14th, 2020. So, in layman's language, even any amount, any interest that is paid prior to the completion of construction is treated as pre-construction only. Okay, so the interest is from layman's perspective pre-construction interest only, but for income tax purposes this particular amount, okay, if the construction is completed in any financial year, the interest for that entire year shall be treated as post-construction interest. Got it? So subsequently, what is the loan? There is after pre-construction interest, there is still a loan of 5 lakhs, and in between she has paid an amount of 2,50,000. When did she pay that 2,50,000? She has paid it on 1st of Jan 2020. So for a period of 3 months, you will calculate for 2.5 lakhs, and for the remaining 9 months, you will calculate 12% at the rate of you will calculate interest at the rate of 12% on 5 lakhs for 9 months. Okay, when you accumulate both of them, it will come to 52,500. Now this is post completion. This is pre-construction. Alright, now these two can be claimed as a deduction in the financial year 2019-20, that is in the assessment year 2020-21. When you are calculating your income from house property, you can claim the interest component, this particular interest component, you can claim it as a deduction. I hope I am clear. Now the next one is unrealized rent and recovery of unrealized rent. Okay, now how will you calculate it? Now what is your actual rent? Rent received plus receivable minus unrealized rent. What is unrealized rent? That is something which is gone bad, that you have understood that you will never receive. Assume the tenant has come from another state. He is a bachelor. He stayed for a few years and suddenly out of nowhere he left without paying 6 months rent. You don't have his identity, you don't have his proper, you can't trace him out even legally also. So what will you do? You are helpless. So that is the rent which is unrealized. Alright. So actual rent, how will you calculate it? It is rent received, what you have received, what is receivable, which is tentative to be received. The tenant is there, he told he'll pay you after 2 months, he is very certain. So that is receivable minus the unrealized rent which is gone for good. Now, for considering a particular amount as an unrealized rent, under Rule 4, there are 4 conditions what you have to keep a note of. Tenancy, it should be bona fide. Okay, that is, it should be genuine and real. It should not be just a created one. Okay, just for the heck of avoiding for claiming a deduction or something. Then the tenant should have actually vacated the property. Okay, genuinely he must have ran away somewhere or something like that. Then such tenant should not occupy any other house. Now you have 4 houses. First house, he vacated abruptly, he ran away. Now again he came and occupied your 4th house. So you cannot consider the rent which has not been paid by him as unrealized rent in the first house case. If he is occupying your house, if he is occupying another house of yours without paying the rent in the other house, alright, for IT purposes, income tax, it will not be treated as unrealized rent. So reasonable steps should be taken. That is, you should either try to identify him, try to take legal proceeding or something. If whatever possible, you should try to use your basic possibility to recover your rent. And arrears of rent means something which is totally in dispute. Now going forward, section 25A, ignore the section, just understand the concept. Now recovery of unrealized rent and arrears of rent. Now for instance, this financial year I don't recover a certain amount. Assume out of nowhere the person has disappeared, he has not paid me a rent of 6 months. So assume the rent is 20,000 and 20 into 6 months, I will calculate it, okay, and that particular rent I will treat it as unrealized rent. Okay, then after few years, say after 4 or 5 years, I will recover it. I will find that person. When I find that person and he repays it, how will you deal with it? That is what this section is telling you. We'll look at them through practical examples. Now, in the first case, assume the unrealized rent is 60,000. Now, in the first case, if the unrealized rent is 60,000 for the previous year 2010-11, okay, and it is allowed. What is allowed? Out of 60,000, the whole thing. I went to the assessing officer and I told him, sir, I have not realized rent. That fellow feels something is fishy partially. Instead of allowing 60,000, he will allow me only 35,000. Okay, and the remaining thing I am not permitted. Okay, so on the remaining amount I will be paying tax technically. Okay, for example, wait. I have not realized 60,000 rent. The tenant ran away. Now I will go to an assessing officer. I will tell him my problem. He will tell no, I am not convinced for his own reasons. He will tell I will permit you only for 35,000 only. This is only genuine. The rest is not actually genuine. So on the remaining part, how much is the remaining part? It will be 25,000. On the remaining 25,000, after claiming deduction of 30%, I will be paying tax. On how much amount? Okay, whatever it is, I will be paying tax on 25,000. This will be treated as a taxable amount. Now, after 2011, after almost so many years, I will recover the rent in the last financial year. 52,000 I will recover out of 60,000. Now, 52,000 is the amount what I have recovered now. When I recover 52,000, question is, will the entire amount be taxable? No. Okay. Earlier, what did the assessing officer do? I told him 60,000 is unrealized, but he allowed only how much? 35,000 he has allowed me. On the remaining 25,000, I did pay rent. So when I paid, not rent, I did pay tax on the 25,000. So out of 52,000, you will not be taxed on the entire amount. You will be reducing 25,000 what was disallowed earlier, and on the remaining amount, that is 52,000 minus 25,000, the remaining amount 27,000 will be your amount on which it will be treated as a taxable amount. However, after reducing statutory deductions of 30%, that is on 27,000 only 70% will be treated as the taxable component. Why deduction of 30%? I already told you. You will be receiving a deduction of 30% on the amount. On similar lines only, the yes. Now the same example continues with a little modification. Now you have an unrealized rent of 50,000. Okay, when you have an unrealized rent of 50,000, the assessing officer is disallowing 22,000. Then you have recovered 45,000. Now, what is the taxable amount? What is the taxable amount? How much did you recover? You have recovered 45,000 in the year 2019-20. That is in the subsequent year. And then, what was the amount that was disallowed? 22,000 was disallowed. Disallowed meaning to say that was brought under the ambit of taxes. So, on 45,000, you will reduce 22,000. On the remaining amount only, you will calculate 70%, and whatever you arrive at, this will be your tax component. Okay, not tax component, that will be the taxable value on which tax will be calculated. And the last thing, last example in the same scenario, if the amount disallowed is more and the amount recovered is less, for obvious reasons you will not be paying tax. In continuation to the above example, unrealized rent is 50,000, what is allowed is 20,000. So what is disallowed is 30,000 has been disallowed. When 30,000 has been disallowed, what is recovered subsequently? 18,000 has been recovered. So you have paid tax for 30,000, but you have recovered only 18,000. So obviously whatever was disallowed earlier by the assessing officer is relatively higher. So keeping that in mind, 18,000 will not be treated as taxable amount, and whatever expenses you bear either legally or in any other manner, okay, you will not be recovering that amount, and you will not be allowed as an expenditure, okay, from the taxable amount. Now one more important point here, assume your expected rent is less than the actual rent plus vacancy period. Okay, now assume your expected rent is say 2 lakhs and your actual rent is 2,50,000 and your vacancy period is 50,000, that is 2.5 lakh into 0.50, that is 3 lakhs. So if this is the case, if your expected rent is less than or equal to actual rent plus vacancy rent, what will be the gross annual value is your actual rent will be your gross annual value. Meaning to say, don't include this also. Here in our example, 2.5 lakh will be your gross annual value, not 3 lakhs, not 2 lakhs. Okay, I repeat. If your expected rent is less than or equal to actual rent plus vacancy rent, that is the period for the rent for the period which it has remained vacant. Okay, in this particular case, your gross annual value will be your actual rent alone. And in the other case, if your expected rent, okay, it is greater, if it is greater than your actual rent and vacancy rent, then your expected rent only will be your gross annual value. Now this is also put forward in the form of examples. Now consider a monthly rent of 20,000 per annum, per month. Okay, so 20,000 per month, how much does it go to? It will come to 2,40,000. Alright, however, the vacancy is for 3 months. So 20,000 into 3 months, how much will it come down to? It will come down to 60,000. And then the other part, 20,000 into for the remaining period. This is your rent for which it was occupied. 9 to 18, 1,80,000. Okay, so your actual rent plus vacancy rent is 2,40,000 and your expected rent is 1,92,000. Now comparing both, okay, now your 2,40,000 is certainly greater, okay, when you combine it. So since your expected rent is less than AR plus VR, your actual rent, that is 1,80,000, only 1,80,000, not this, your 1,80,000 will be your gross annual value. Alright, now in the second scenario, assume your monthly rent is 3,000 per month and your expected rent is 1,90,000. So how much does it come to? 3,000 into 12 months is nothing but 36,000, but then it has been vacant for how many months? For 2 months. So for the period it was occupied, you will calculate 30,000. Okay, for the period it was occupied, you will calculate 30,000, and for the vacant period, that is 6,000, also you will add. both together accumulate to 36,000. Alright, so any day 1,95,000 is greater than the whole of 36,000. So 1,96,000, 1,95,000 will be your gross annual value. And the third case is where it is equal. If it is equal, the expected rent and these together are equal. Okay, if it is equal also, your actual rent that is received, that will be your gross annual value. Simple as that. And the concept of partly let out property. Assume I have a house and it is partly let out and partly I am occupying it. How do you calculate it? How do you calculate the expenses and everything? Whatever I incur, it will be distributed proportionately based on the area. For example, say I incur 10,000 rupees. Say I incur 10,000 rupees on a particular expenditure, say municipal taxes. Okay, on municipal taxes, expenditure is not basically allowed except for municipal taxes specifically. Now say on municipal taxes, I am paying an amount of 10,000 rupees. When I am paying an amount of 10,000 rupees, say I am occupying 30% of the land and 70% of the land I have let it out. So out of 10,000, 7,000 will be allowed as deduction for this particular thing. Assume this 30% is self-occupied. Municipal taxes on self-occupied property not allowed. So only 7,000 shall be considered. But the point here is not about how much is allowed. It is about how much you will proportion it. You will be apportioning it based on the area. Now, concept of partly let out property time wise. Okay, what is he telling you here? If property is let out for some period of time and self-occupied for remaining time, then such property is treated as let out property only. If the property is let out even for one day, then also it is treated as let out and it is not self-occupied. Please note this point. Now, SSE owns more than 2 self-occupied properties. Okay, 2 of such house properties are treated as self-occupied and the remaining, for example, I told you already, you own say 5 houses. When you own 5 houses, only 2 houses of your choice, anything, it may be 2, second and fifth house, first and third, second and third, anything. You can claim an exemption for 2 houses, that is you will not be taxed for 2 houses, and for the remaining 3 houses you will be calculated based on the norms which we have already seen. Then the concept of joint property. Okay, how will you calculate the interest? When it comes to let out property, no debate, whoever incurs, for example say Ram and Shyam, okay, they hold a particular property, okay, equally. Now whatever interest Mr. Ram has taken, assume Ram has taken and he is paying an interest of 3 lakhs. When he is paying an interest of 3 lakhs on 50% of the property also, he will be allowed in total. Okay, he will be allowed in total. Similarly, Shyam also, whatever interest Shyam is bearing on let out property, the entire amount is totally allowed. However, when it comes to self-occupied property, say again Ram and Shyam, they have purchased another house wherein they are sharing equally. Okay, they are sharing it equally and they have taken a loan also equally. So each person will individually be allowed an interest of 2 lakhs up to a max of 2 lakhs, provided the property is not the property, the loan is taken after first of 99 for 1499. After that, prior to that, if it is prior to that, only 30,000 will be allowed. If loan is taken prior to that particular date, the interest component will be allowed subject to a max of only 30,000 for each person individually. Now the next one is composite rent. Of late, you must have observed in the last several years most of the properties are let out along with the furniture and lot of equipment inside the house. Okay, you have many fancy equipment, many fancy apartments and all those things. So when you let out your house property along with those, okay, you must have a separate agreement for the house and also for those other assets. If you don't have a separate agreement, okay, and if you are not able to identify it, what will you do? The entire amount whatever is being generated, that will be taxable either under income from other sources or profits and gains from business and profession. Assume you are able to separate the two, there are separate agreements for the two, then income from house property will be taxed under income from house property and the rest is under other sources. Okay, this is what he is telling you. Income, if it is separable, then rent from house property, it will be taxed under income from other sources, see, the house will be treated under income from house property, and for the assets whatever are being provided under income from other sources or PGBP. And the same, and if they are not separable, the entire amount, even the income what you get from house property, if it is not separable, it is not, if you are not able to separate it, then everything will be taxed under income from other sources or PGBP. Now for example, you take a hotel, by default what it will be treated as income from other sources or income from PGBP. Now this apart, you have a concept called as deemed owner. What is deemed owner? It is concluding a particular person to be to be a owner of a particular property, although the property is not registered on his name. For example, you take Rahul. Okay, Rahul has transferred his property to Mrs. Rahul. He is transferring it to his wife. Why is he doing that? His wife has no income. Okay, his wife has no income and Rahul falls under 30% slab rate. So this additional income whatever Rahul is generating, he is being taxed at a higher component, and now he is also having a particular property which is generating say 2,50,000. Now if this 2,50,000 is charged in the hands of Rahul, he has to pay a tax of 30%. Assume roughly, okay, he has to pay a tax of 30%. Now if he transfers the property to his wife's name, since she is not a taxable SSE, she need not pay any tax and Rahul will be saving this 30%. Now keeping in mind such scenarios, to avoid tax, what the income tax department has done is, whenever it has brought down few scenarios and that is dealt with under section 27. Now for instance, say in this particular scenario, if a spouse transfers an asset to another spouse, I mean to his spouse, say in this case Rahul is transferring it, Rahul will be treated as the deemed owner. Okay, he will be treated as the deemed owner, and the amount whatever is generated in the hands of his wife also will be taxed again in the name of Rahul only. So in this case, so if any individual, if he is transferring, however, in the next scenario, if Rahul is transferring the asset and the cost of the asset is being paid by his wife to Rahul, okay, then it is treated as a genuine transaction. However, if there is no consideration, then Rahul only will be treated as the owner for income tax purposes, although the asset has been transferred to Mrs. X. Now that apart, there is one exemption to this. There is an exception. What is the exception? Assume the husband and the wife are separated. Now if they are separated, and as a result of that the court orders Mr. Rahul to give a particular compensation to his wife, and as a result of that he transfers a particular property to his wife. In that particular scenario, he doesn't take any consideration, but in that case the asset which is transferred shall be treated as the asset of Mrs. Rahul only, and the income also will be treated and taxed in the hands of his wife only. Okay, if there is any agreement to live apart, okay, it may be breakup, it may be anything. Now the second scenario, if an individual transfers any house to a minor child, now same thing. Now take X is there. He has a small young daughter who is just 17 years old. Okay. Now he will take his asset and he will transfer it. That asset is generating a good income just to avoid tax, as his younger daughter is not under the ambit of tax. So this, in this scenario also, though the asset is being transferred without consideration, X only will be treated as the owner. If assume she is a child artist, if she is generating lot of money, and for whatever house her father has transferred, if that girl is paying back consideration, then it is a normal transaction. Then X will not be treated as the father will not be treated as the owner. The younger minor daughter only will be treated as the actual owner. I hope you got my point. Now, in the same case, assume though she is minor, in India, marriage of minors is not acceptable. It is illegal. But then still, if she is married at the age of 17 or at the age of 16 only, and as a result of her marriage, her father is giving her a property, now that is treated as an exemption. So in that particular case, in the event of she getting married, okay, in the event of she getting married as a minor girl, even if she doesn't give consideration for a property which is being transferred by her father, that will be treated as exemption, and X will not be treated as owner if he transfers a property when she is married, even as a minor child. The next thing, a member of a cooperative society, company or association. Now for example, the third thing says that now if you are a member of a cooperative society and as a result of some housing scheme you are given a house, that will be treated as your house. You will be the owner of that particular house and not the cooperative society and not the company which is giving you as a result of that housing scheme. And the last point is impartable estate. Holder of an impartable estate. Now say for example you have a Hindu undivided family. Now though the property has been inherited and belongs to the individual members equally, okay, the property is held in the name of the HUF, and it is any income that is generated from that property is taxed in the hands of the HUF only. What is an impartable estate? The property which cannot be divided. Okay, so that is what. So the in this last case, the HUF, though the owners are the individual people equally, the HUF is treated as a deemed owner. That is called holder of impartable estate. Now these are all the provisions for house property for students who are writing their exam in Jan 2021, the upcoming exam very soon. And after this video, I will be coming up with the second part of the video wherein I will be covering problems from house property. I'll try to cover all the provisions whatever we have discussed, and I'll try to explain all the technical points as well. Okay, have a good day. I'll see you in the second video. Bye.